Okay, for this next section, we're going to blitz through a lot of time here because we really want to get to the civil rights movement. A lot of what we've looked at up to this point has been setting the stage for civil rights. But we haven't even entered the 20th century. So here's what this next section is going to look at. And we're really just taking like big snapshots um, from America's formation to the 20th century. And so the first part's really going to look at the lead up to the Civil War. What are some of the things that led to that? We've already covered a great deal of that, but there will be some realities in the way the states are divided. So part of the way American politics work is that um, elections happen based on the states voting for a particular individual or party. Northern states voted one way, southern states voted another way. And so what had happened was is about 50% of the states that had allowed for slavery were in the south and 50% were in the north. Anytime they wanted to form a new territory as they pushed westward, right? So, like, they started along the Atlantic coast, started pushing out past Ohio, past Kentucky, into the Indiana territories and Oklahoma and going into Colorado, all the way out to the west coast. As these territories had more population come into them, they had to form them into states. But this causes all kind of political turmoil because the South does not want more free states than southern states because it will undo the balance of who rules in power in Washington, and there's fear that there will be an attempt to revoke slavery. So that's why it pushes on for years and years, and there's all kinds of creative ways to try to avoid the conflict they see coming, but it is inevitable. So it'll be the lead up to the Civil War. It'll be dealing with Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War. And then there'll be this interesting thing called Reconstruction. So after the Civil War is won by the North, and after the Union is preserved and the slaves are freed, um, there is going to be this attempt to try to not only give them legal freedom and legal abilities to vote, but it's going to try to give them a means to be able to go into making a life for themselves. You got to like imagine if you're a black slave your whole life and then all of a sudden one day you're free. You have no education, you have no property, you have no finances. Like, what's for you? And you all live in the South where it's really racist. So there's going to be this attempt at Reconstruction, and it's going to utterly fail. And what it's going to lead to is there's going to be new laws enacted throughout certain states, a lot of separate but equal laws, but it was never equal. And this is where you're going to start to see segregation come out. And there's going to be all kinds of different details that pop into this. But this is where you're slowly starting to see things go from like a version of bad to a new reality of bad. The new reality of bad is they might not be slaves anymore, but they have really limited to no rights. And the way that whites in the South keep the black man from rising up and taking hold of his life and voting and finding good education and employment, fighting for rights are going to be through terror. And this is where the Ku Klux Klan is going to form. And they're going to use intimidation to try to keep people down, and it will work until the government steps in with their military. But you'll see different waves of the KKK come in and try to stop things from popping up. Out of this, you're going to see two very important individuals. One is Booker T. Washington, the other one's W.E. Du Bois. There's a video on them and why they were very different, but one, Booker T. Washington had the view that says, like, hey, like, accept our limitations from politics and try to don't rock the boat and achieve the best that you can because over time your life will get better. It's a very short-sighted view, but a very pragmatist view. It wasn't a bad view. It was just what he was trying to say is, hey, like we're not going to realistically get the rights we want in our lifetime, so just settle. W. Du Bois, on the other hand, said you never settle and you always fight. So he's like a precursor for what will be the civil rights movement that will come out, a few decades after his life. You're going to learn about the NAACP that will pop up. the national advancement for colored people. And then right leading up to that, we're going to, just before we get to, the 1940s, 50s, where the civil rights movement actually starts, we're going to see some realities about what it was like to be black in the South, and how the white media, as media is starting to come about, like in television and film, was portrayed. So you'll hear about Jim Crow and minstrel shows and blackface. There's this one of the first movies. His first movie ever played in the White House was called Birth of a Nation, and it's going to really show, it's essentially like it's a fear mongering film that's just making African Americans look like animals and buffoons. And so this is how they were portrayed amongst white counterparts, to kind of reinforce this ideology that they're less than, and even to a certain degree, dangerous. So this is going to be kind of the backdrop that leads into racist attitudes that won't be resolved until the beginning of the 1940s and 50s, and even then it's limited. Okay, so that should get you started. Watch those videos. Let me know. There's no assignment at the end of this. Just let me know when you've watched these. If there's any questions that pop up, send me an email, text, video, whatever, and then we'll get into the next section that really starts with Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. Okay, have a good one.